Welcome to the Occupational Safety Leadership Podcast, episode number 233 with Wendy Buckley of Hazmat. Um, first off, I want to first off, I want to thank you for coming on board, and I really want to focus on lithium batteries. I just don't think folks truly understand the potential power. A lot of times, of course, there's no bad effects that happen, but when they do happen, it's pretty darn bad. So, but before that we get started, could you tell folks a little bit about your background and just what made you go into hazmat stuff anyway?
So yeah, I'm Wendy Buckley, President and CEO of Starz Hazmat Consulting, and we are a consulting firm that helps carriers, shippers, warehouses, 3PLs, anyone who's transporting, storing, or handling hazardous materials to do so with regulatory compliance, safety, managing risk, and best practices. My background includes 10 years in the fire department responding to these types of emergencies, not necessarily lithium batteries back then, but certainly hazardous materials and things like that. I also was an FRA, Federal Railroad Administration hazmat inspector. That's part of the DOT. So I was tasked with enforcing regulations for shippers and carriers and others who were transporting hazmat. In that case, it was by rail. I have done training all over the country for all modes of transportation, including Transport Canada, DOT, IATA, and IMDG. I worked as regulatory affairs manager for a global laboratory supply company. And now I have owned my consulting firm for 13 years. And we work with everything from Fortune 500 companies all the way down to little mom and pop realty and landscaping companies.
Very good, very good. Thank you. And I guess that before that we really dive into the actual meat of it, let's just take just a couple seconds and talk about the hazards of lithium batteries.
So honestly, the biggest hazard, and the one probably everyone's aware of, is that these things have a real bad fire hazard. Not only do they catch fire relatively easily, something as simple as dropping them or damaging them or getting them overheated, but they also, once they start burning, can cause thermal runaway, which is a fire that you really can't control. And unfortunately, even if you think you've ignited that fire, it can continue to reignite. And while it's burning, it emits toxic gases and can catch other things near it on fire. And these fires can start with something as simple as, you have an e-cigarette in your pocket and your keys touch it, and now your pocket's on fire. That's actually a real life experience that I know someone has experienced. So, they're volatile, they're dangerous, they're difficult to put out, especially when they're in large formats like electronic vehicles.
Wow, that's right. That's right. So when I think of it, I think of like my little laptop. I think of like some small things that we do at labs and all that kind of stuff. But a car, that's going to be really hard to put out. So,
I worry about that a lot. Not only cars, but also they're also trying to do semis, like big trucks, as
mhm,
well as
mhm.
forklifts and other types of vehicles. I mean, you think you have a bad pileup on, I-95 or I-80 or whatever now, and it's three or four gasoline powered vehicles that you can surround and drown. That's what we used to say in the fire department, put the wet stuff on the red stuff, right?
Right, right,
Um,
right. Uh-huh.
but you can't really do that with lithium batteries. In fact, if you put water on a lithium battery fire, you can actually make it worse. So I mean, you need a significant amount of water. It's not the old trash lines that it used to be. Now you need a significant amount of water if you can put them out with water. And again, they continue to reignite. So not only are you putting the people in the car in significant danger, because there's lots of accidents where the cars don't catch on fire. That's not going to be so much the case anymore with lithium batteries. But now also if one car catches on fire, it's going to catch the next one and the next one on fire. And all those people and all the communities surrounding it because those toxic gases are now at risk that weren't before.
Right, 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 right. And I don't know about you, but my traffic is really bad here. So I could definitely see where people have that bumper to bumper traffic because everybody thinks, oh, there's an accident. I'll just get up closer, you know. And now, of course, you have even more cars in, even closer in this whole thing then. So,
Yeah, and the worst part is most of the fire departments in our country, and you can look this up, it's actually a statistic, the vast majority, and I believe it's something over 75% of the fire services are rural in our country. Many are staffed by volunteers, and even the paid departments are not as well trained as you might think. I mean, they're not all New York City, right? So they're not all getting that level of expert training and hazmat exposure. I was in two different types of fire departments. I was in a very rural station, and I was also in a more like an urban type environment just outside of a big city. And the difference in training was amazing. I mean, not night and day, not even in the same ballpark. Hardly any. Just sort of teach you how to operate the hose basically, versus putting you through a whole school. The difference was dramatic.
Right, right, right. And I have to also picture that because this is still a relatively new hazard out there that
Mhm.
maybe the fire departments, even if they can put this out with the knowledge they have, they may not have the equipment to put this out. It may be something that they have to actually bring. But if nobody says it's a lithium, it's a metal battery, I mean, it's a metal fire, all that stuff, then they may not have it available on the truck.
And I guarantee you that not only do the fire departments not know, but the general public definitely doesn't know. The people, in fact, who should know don't. There was not long ago, I was going to visit a customer's warehouse, and they were thinking about bringing me on to help. They wanted to start bringing in hazardous materials for the first time. And they started off the meeting by telling me, we don't have any hazmat now, but we'd like to. So I went for a tour in their warehouse, and I start walking through the building, and I said, you do have hazardous materials. And they said, what are you talking about? They had 28,000 e-bikes, which are not as big as electronic vehicles, but they're certainly not button cells. I mean, they're good sized batteries. So
Yeah.
28,000 of them. And by the way, the other thing that they had in storage in large abundance was rolls of paper. Good combination.
It seems like they purposely tried to have a fire almost at this point in
Yeah,
time.
right. They did not know they were lithium batteries. They did not know they were hazardous materials. I looked at the documents that their supplier had sent them, their customer. They didn't declare them as hazardous materials.
Oh,
So
interesting.
yeah, so whether the supplier intentionally did that, I don't know. Maybe it was just an oversight and accident, but my client definitely did not know. And when I calculated up the fine from DOT and the fine from OSHA, one was over 400,000 and one was over 500,000. If they were to either identify those as, being in that facility without being marked or labeled or anything, or if they were trying to ship them out and back to the customer like that. So now they've already taken possession of them. They've taken responsibility. That's like $1 million in fines potentially if they just ship them out as is.
Oh,
So
yeah,
yeah, it was a pretty big situation.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So what got me thinking about reaching out and finding you and doing some research on this whole thing is that I was talking to a friend of mine, and of course he calls and says, "You won't believe what happened to me." So he is a safety guy. He has a lot of different facilities, but he's only one person, and so one person you can only do so much. You can't be at every single facility. You can't travel multiple time zones every single day checking in on things. So his little R&D department decided that they were going to do some research on lithium batteries. So they started to buy these, break them apart, do all kinds of things and they had been successful for quite a few months, no issues, no anything, of course. But when they did have a issue, of course, like all things, it always has to be a Saturday night at midnight. People can't find anybody. There's a fire that's going on. The fire department's just putting on more and more water. Like, oh well, I have to put this building out. And then of course someone's like, well, we have lithium batteries in there. And when they go to peel peel back that onion and really kind of figure out exactly why. They did almost nothing to alter the building. They did almost nothing as far as, well, why don't we even plan for how do we even plan to do this as safe as we possibly can? Because to them, it's just a battery. A battery's a battery. You just break it apart, you make it better. We'll do some slicing and dicing of things. We'll solder some wires. We'll do all kinds of stuff then. And it was a really, really big deal. So, and part of the big deal is they just didn't understand, like, but I do have a sprinkler. I have to be fine.
Yeah. And the thing is the ways that these batteries typically can get suppressed, and I won't say put out because that's almost impossible until the fuel is fully spent. But
Right, right,
um,
right.
uh, the way that we can get them suppressed is usually going to be with a Class D chemical extinguisher, which is designed for metal fires. Halon is also effective, but the real problem with halon is it's an asphyxiant, so you can't put into a place where there's people there. So the room would have to be sealed and all of that. So those are typically going to be used in places where there's like computer equipment and things like that. But it is effective on lithium fires, and Class D extinguishers are also effective. Um, but yeah, so to not prepare the building, to not have any storage protocols or anything, um, Yeah, that's pretty dangerous stuff right there.
Right,
There's
right,
so much
right.
energy packed into those batteries, and that's the difference, right? So you think about like a double A or triple A, and they're not rechargeable, right? The charge
Mhm,
goes from one end of the battery to the other, and when that fuel is spent, the fuel is spent. Well, with lithium
mhm.
batteries, it goes back and forth and back and forth as you discharge and recharge that battery. And there's so much energy, and that's what makes lithium batteries so valuable. Is we can power things with batteries we couldn't before. Power tools and electric vehicles and scooters, and that would never be powered by C batteries. Could you imagine? Um, so you know, uh, so because it is so energy intense and so dense, that just ramps up the danger astronomically.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. So just to kind of go back and break down this incident, and of course I don't want to get into like the state and the company name, all that kind of stuff then. But let's just say that somebody comes to you and says, okay, I got this space and it's like a lab with some benches on top, and we want to do some research on lithium batteries. We want to take stuff that we're buying commercially. We want to make it better. We want to break it in half. We want to maybe change its form to make it fit into a different thing. Can you think of like a couple of the steps that you would go through besides just laughing, of course, first, but like a couple of steps that you would say we have to do the following things to make it as safe as we can to really use this stuff.
Listen, I am not a lab expert, but I will say
Mhm.
the idea of breaking apart a lithium battery is terrifying.
Right.
There's definitely better ways to do that. Like rather than breaking something apart that's already built, how about you purchase the cells individually and make your own batteries? Then you can make them in whatever shape that you want. That's a lot less dangerous. Then you can also trace where the batteries came from, whether they've been properly tested by the UN standards, and making sure that you have a reputable buyer. If you just buy something off the shelf and start breaking it up, the risk involved in that is substantial. All it takes is making a mistake when you go to break that battery up and you break a wire or connection incorrectly, or you crush a cell by mistake. I mean, please, 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 that's a terrible idea. Okay. But
Hmm.
assuming that they did it anyway without my approval, I would tell them first we need to check the fire codes and find out what the limit is that you're allowed here. We need to make sure that your fire suppression system is ready, that you have the proper suppression equipment, such as the Class D extinguishers, that your fire code will even allow you to do this sort of testing here, that your building lease will allow you to do this testing here, and that you have the proper equipment to contain a damaged battery. So if you do break a battery apart and the test goes horribly wrong, can you contain the fire? Can you contain the battery once it goes bad? Because once those fires start, if you don't contain them, the whole building is going to come down. I mean, you have to have something there. There's special packaging made for damaged batteries. There's special packaging made now for batteries that are on fire. um, Different types of blankets and things, varying degrees of success. But having absolutely nothing, conducting such dangerous experiments, and then most importantly, do the people that are doing it have the proper PPE? Do they have the proper breathing equipment? Because again, that stuff emits flammable gases and toxic gases. Do they have the training to be able to do it? And I'm not even going to say safely, because I don't think that can be done safely. To be honest with you, that's a crazy idea.
Hmm.
But do they have the training? Do they have the equipment? Do they have the personal protection?
Right, right, right,
And
right,
then
right.
increase your insurance. Definitely increase your insurance.
Yes, yes. So the story that he got is they were trying to alter the form so they could go back and say this is exactly the form that we actually want. And it's got the power to it, it's got all that stuff, and now we find somebody to make it for us. To then say, so now that we know exactly what we want, somebody else can make this. And they were going through a lot of different, well, what if we did it in this configuration? What if we did this? And, a lot of those different things out there then. So, um, if I could switch gears just a little bit on you, I have seen where people almost have like these little like overpacks. And I guess I would describe it as maybe a gallon or 2 gallon bucket, but it's a very heavy steel kind of a bucket. And what I found is that it says you just take it, throw it in, put the lid on, you're going to ratchet it on tight, and all that kind of good stuff then. Um, and to me, that sounds great and that sounds awesome, but I always worry like, is it just kind of masking the issue, or is the fire so hot? You did a good job of slowing it down, but it'll just melt the outer steel. that
Well,
container, I'll call it,
that entirely depends on whether that container is built for that.
Right.
Is that a package that's designed to undergo the stresses of that catastrophic failure? Because that's exactly what it is. It's a catastrophic failure once those batteries start to react or even ignite. And there is packaging design for that has been tested. And there's buckets and there's boxes and there's trunks and all sorts of different things. Like I said, I've even seen a blanket recently. So if the package is designed for that, then no, it should not melt. But if you just decide you're going to buy a metal drum off the shelf and try it, yeah, not such a great idea.
Right. So this company, they actually had called it a lithium battery overpack. And so the way they described it is, hey, when there's an issue with the battery, you throw the battery in, you put the top on. It kind of has almost like a friction lock on it. Close it tight, and let it be. And I'm still waiting to get the actual info from them. And that's what leads me to think that, well, that's awesome that there's a place to put it, but is it going to melt the steel and just kind of continue on? You
Well,
know.
let's be very clear. That's
So,
not an overpack. Okay.
oh,
That is not an overpack. So
right,
if they're calling it that, what that leads me to believe is maybe they bought what they thought was the right package, and it's not, or perhaps they're just calling it by the wrong name. An overpack is actually defined as a way to consolidate packages that are compliant and ready for transportation. So let's say 2 boxes that you put in a wooden crate. That's an overpack.
right.
What they technically have is a salvage package. And again, is it just a general salvage package or was it designed for lithium batteries? If it is a lithium battery package that's designed for damaged or non-compliant batteries, then it should contain that. That is the right thing to do. But the
Hmm.
question is, was that what it was designed to do?
Right. So the company is calling it a a overpack, of course. But I
Right.
really think that it's meant for a salvage because
Okay.
you can get in a couple of these batteries. I would certainly hope that you would only do one because as you're
Should
having
only do one.
a issue with one, well, don't just keep adding to it, of course, at the
Yes,
same
yes.
time.
Yes, the more batteries you add to it, the more you're increasing the risk. Yeah, those are designed to only hold one battery, and in fact, if they can hold more than one, that probably isn't the right salvage package because it probably should be smaller to contain that one battery. The bigger the package, the bigger the battery it's designed to hold.
Right. So the ones that I've seen are probably about a gallon size bucket, it looks like. And of course
Okay.
it's really heavy gauge steel and all that kind of stuff then. But I'm
And
still
how big is
trying
the battery that they're putting in it?
probably about the size of a laptop battery.
Okay,
But
it's hard to
that's
picture.
only if they have to, of course. So
Right,
yeah.
right, of course.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
yeah, I mean, you'd have to look. I mean, I can't say until I see the battery itself and what it's rated for, and see the package and what it's rated for. But
Right.
if that's indeed what it is, then that is indeed the right thing to do. But you should definitely only be putting one battery in there. And if it's broken apart into different cells, if you can separate the cells and they're already separated, don't just throw all the cells from one battery in there because they all went together originally. If one's on fire, let it be by itself.
Right, exactly. Exactly. So, and yeah, so I'm kind of giving you some fuzzy details because I don't want to get into the company, of course, in the city, and all
Of
that kind of
course,
stuff too over over at the same time then. So,
of course.
we talked about a couple things to kind of get your building ready and your processes ready and all that kind of stuff. Would you recommend bringing in your fire department, your fire service, and saying, hey, let's just do a little walkthrough, like, uh, help me to understand what's going to help you to tackle a fire at my facility?
Absolutely. And that's a common practice. When I was with the fire service, we did a lot of different walkthroughs like that. Some were scheduled that we had to do because it was time for their annual inspection or they were filing for a new permit or something. But we were regularly invited into companies that were doing something different we hadn't seen or that we just hadn't seen in a long time. So yes, that is always a good idea to bring them in and let them be familiar with the facility. You know, uh, there's something so different about a building you've been to a dozen times when suddenly it's in the middle of an incident or emergency, especially if it's fire and there's smoke involved. if you have no knowledge of that building, it is so much more difficult to navigate. But because it looks so different when it's on fire than it even did when it was normal. But then you add to it that you've never seen it before, and it complicates things a lot. God forbid someone's down somewhere, or even a firefighter gets hurt or something. Having some prior knowledge of how the building is laid out internally, where the hazards are, where the exits are, where the fire extinguishers or sprinklers might be, or the standpipe connections, any of those sort of things become very critical in an emergency, especially if, God forbid, someone's hurt or some important structures like hospitals or schools are being threatened.
Right. I do a walkthrough at all of my places every single year just to help the fire department, because if if everybody's outside and you're doing your head count and you're trying to figure out who's there, who's not, and all that, and the guys say, "Oh, there's a fire, I'll just go in the front door and kind of figure out all the stuff," then it's going to be almost impossible for them not to. Um, I shouldn't say impossible. It's going to be really hard for them to understand things like where do I hook up? How do I get into this door? How do I do these things? Really hard for
Yeah.
them.
And I've been in those Mayday situations where a firefighter goes down, or there's a civilian down inside. And I mean, first of all, the situation is already bad enough that somebody's hurt and you got to find them in a building you're not familiar with. But now there's a fire, so it's dark, and most of the time the electricity goes out, at least in part of the building.
Yep.
Um, it's smoke filled. I don't care how many years you've been doing this. I did it for 10, and you still get anxious. You're still on adrenaline, and trying to find your way in the dark, wearing 80 pounds of gear. I mean, the more knowledge you have walking into that situation, the better off you're going to be every single time, especially when somebody's injured.
Oh
You know,
yeah,
if somebody is injured, you don't know what they're injured with, right? Especially if you're in a chemical plant, or a building where they're dealing with chemicals like a laboratory. They could be exposed to
Mm.
anything. Yes, they may have gone down because of a fire, but what happened after? What sort of chemicals are around? What sort of hazards do I have that weren't there before? That's just adding to that stress even more, and adding to the likelihood that it's not going to be a successful recovery.
Right. I think it's also really good for them to see the places where the pumps and the motors and all that kind of stuff then, because
Absolutely.
it seems like things, when they do happen, they happen in these spots that's really hard to even get a gurney in there. To get a person out is just really difficult anyway, and then to kind of understand all that stuff then. So I
Absolutely.
have I have found that if I offer food, everybody shows up for the tour, but if I don't offer food, it's about a 50-50 show. Some people end up being busy and sick and all that kind of stuff then. But if you offer
Listen,
up some food,
firefighter dinners are a real thing. Firefighters like food, I'm going to tell you. So you bring food and you'll get them there.
that's right,
There's
that's right,
a
exactly.
reason they like cooking dinners at night with like 20 people.
Yep, yep, that's right, exactly. So it looks like we are bumping up on time. I still had a couple of things to talk about, so maybe we'll look at doing a part two if this was good for you. But I
Yeah.
want I want I but I want you to take a couple seconds, let folks know how they can find you, connect. If there's any other questions, I know that we literally talked about lithium stuff only, but there's a lot in the hazmat world, out
Yes.
there.
So again, Stars Hazmat Consulting. I'm Wendy Buckley. Please find me on LinkedIn if you'd like. I'm happy to connect. My website is starshazmat.com. Our email address is info@starshazmat.com. So please feel free to connect with me. I look forward to hearing from you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on. And
Thanks for
with
having me.
that,
I
we
look forward
have
to coming back.
thank you. Episode 233 is complete with Wendy. Thank you so much. Everybody have a great day.